I find it interesting that God gives us many chances um to get it right. But but when Satan and all the angels went against God, that was it. There was no.
I don't know if have any of you ever read John Bevere? John Bevere is one of those watermelon writers. Anybody know what I mean by that? There's some seeds you have to spit out. So yeah, it's not true anymore. I don't know how we have watermelons still because they don't have seeds.
How do you plant them?
Yeah,
That's what I want to know. How do
Yeah.
you plant them?
that was. But he talked about how there is a time when fast and terrifying judgment falls. What is the principle behind terrifying judgment?
Done again. So
But what is the situation that brings that? Think about times in biblical history when there was terrifying immediate judgment.
I mean, like when God destroyed the city where Lot's wife was.
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Blatant disregard for God and hate of God.
Where
Not obeying.
Ananias and Sapphira. The flood.
Korah's rebellion.
Korah's rebellion. And you could probably add a few more in there. He draws the thing that there is a direct correlation between the nearness of God and the amount of judgment poured out. What was Ananias and Sapphira's sin?
They lied about the donation, the money.
They lied about their donation so that they appeared that they were giving more than they actually did. Percentage wise. How many people in the history of the world of the church has lied about their giving?
I'm sure several.
I didn't hear that.
How about that one in Bridgeton who said they were gonna miss her when she left and took her money with her?
No, that was up at Roseville,
Oh,
actually.
Roseville. Okay.
Roseville, yeah.
Nobody in present company.
But how many people do you know who were keeled over dead for lying about their giving?
Yeah, but nobody would lie like that. They wouldn't come right out and say, I gave it all.
Well, actually,
I think there are people
that
that do.
example he gave, where he said, "You're gonna miss that money that I gave," and like the whole
Yeah.
church was
Yeah, but-
sponsored off that.
But nobody's saying I gave it all.
Maybe,
I think you're right with the, what you said
But-
about the proximity of God.
but what is the difference between when people normally lie about their giving? Nothing happens, but what is the situation when they do that? The church is generally at best mediocre, maybe even backslidden. And in that kind of environment, there is not the same kind of immediate judgment. But when God actually shows up, let me give you another one. How many high priests did bad things in the temple?
There were two that got zapped right away.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Well, certainly the ones in Jesus. Caiaphas, was he a godly man who was offering godly sacrifices?
No.
Yet he walked away. His stepfather had been the high priest before him. He was still alive, even though he passed the mantle on to Caiaphas. But when Moses's two sons go in and play around in the temple,
Aaron's two sons.
Aaron's two sons, I'm sorry. What happens?
Zap.
Fire from heaven. Boom. Why was it that the temple was they were punished so harshly in the temple then, but these high priests who are murdering Jesus go in and offer sacrifices and they walk out perfectly healthy?
Because they were at the start of it and it had to start off strong.
Because they were at a time when the glory of God was dwelling in the temple. By the time Jesus came, was the glory of God,
No, they had the money changers in
it
there.
was gone. So the proximity to God's glory, because it's a greater affront to him. When it's backslidden and God isn't around and you do something wicked, at least you're not rubbing his nose in it. But when he is present in his power and you do that, it is a direct affront.
What
Now-
about Moses and the 250 censors?
Yeah, the 250 princes, and Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. God's Shekinah glory was on Moses. His face glowed, and they still said, no, we'll do our own thing. So,
Could you say that the same with when God did not allow Moses to cross?
Right, I was thinking that.
yep, same thing.
Because the Jewish people are super angry. I mean, they have a kind of
Yep.
love-hate relationship with God. And every time we go into that Torah study, they get, everybody's upset.
Yep.
about
So,
that.
in human experience, where was God's glory the closest in all of human
Adam
history?
and Eve.
Yeah, the garden. So what happened when they sinned in the garden? Immediate judgment, they're thrown out.
I got
No chance to get forgiven, no second, boom, they're gone.
a question for that. God asked Adam about it, and he passed the buck and gave it to Eve, and Eve passed it to Satan.
Well,
So the thing,
actually, it's worse.
okay,
Adam didn't just pass the buck to Eve.
He blamed God. Why'd you
Yeah.
create this?
This woman you gave me. So who was he saying was at fault?
God.
Yeah, God didn't like that either.
yeah, so
This is
instantaneous.
conjecture, but what do you think would have happened if he would have owned up to it immediately without same thing or?
I don't know.
That was the question I was thinking.
But if you go one step further,
It did compound it.
Yeah,
if you go one step further, where is God's Shekinah glory even greater than the Garden of Eden?
Heaven.
Jesus, right?
Where is God's Shekinah glory greater than the Garden of Eden?
With Jesus, something with him.
Heaven.
Heaven. That's the ultimate expression of God's presence, right?
right.
So when the angels sin in that environment, is there any going back on that?
Mm-mm.
And so that's where you see that these angels, no provision made. You had that level. Now, is there a verse that would confirm this?
That in Revelations.
No,
Genesis.
it's in the Gospels.
About Satan.
No, about this principle of judgment being directly tied to God's glory.
Not at the crucifixion when he said something to the women.
Nope.
Hmm. No idea.
Luke 12:48. Luke 12:48. This is what we're talking about with principles. This is going beyond just understanding what God does to why it is that he does things. What's that say?
The one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked.
So there is a direct correlation to the amount of light and or a better word. I don't want to use knowledge because knowledge can mean in English can mean, just superficial kind of things. But the encountering of God, the more of that you have, the more God holds us accountable for that.
Like the pygmy in Africa who dies without
Yep.
God, and here it's different than somebody over here that we have
Yeah.
Bibles in every home.
Yep. So, but ultimately, this is more than having a Bible. This is, I have encountered the living God. So when Pharaoh hardens his heart, he is judged so severely. Why?
Because he's been warned.
Because not just he's been warned, God has demonstrated his presence. And it's not like when a person is warned today by a person who says, well, the Bible says Pharaoh saw it, he experienced it, he knew God was there, and he didn't care. His own sorcerer said, nah, this isn't just our trick bag of tricks. So again, who experienced even more than Pharaoh? Even more than Moses? Even more than Adam and Eve?
Angels.
The angels. So when they rebelled, how much had they been given?
Like
They had everything.
Yeah. So therefore, what was their level of punishment?
The maximum.
Yeah. And so does that make sense?
Yeah.
They could have written Blackaby's Experiencing God book.
Yeah.
And up till then, there was no sin. Right, so. And as you said, it was like for us, it's easy to sin, hard
Yeah.
to do the right thing, just in reverse. So it was hard for them to.
They had to work at it.
Yeah.
It went against their nature. What's the second one?
The second one is, if I know it's not possible because it's written in the Bible, but if every single person repented and said, what are we doing? And they all asked Jesus for forgiveness and got saved, would we still have to have Armageddon, or was that just for the people who were sinners, or was that for Satan and his people?
I'll answer that in small rather than big, because I think there is an answer to it. Um, Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 34. What's that say?
Chapter 1.
Verse 33,
No, Second Chronicles.
34, 33.
Josiah removed all the detestable idols from all the territory belonging to the Israelites, and he had all who were present in Israel serve the Lord their God as long as he lived. They did not fail to follow the Lord, the God of their ancestors.
So what was the condition during Josiah's reign?
Take away all the idols,
They served the Lord continuously until his death.
What was the upshot of that?
destroy the idols.
But what was the upshot of this reform when all the people turned to God?
As long as he lived.
What happened? And in almost every single situation, and if you had one generation in every single situation, what has always happened with any great movement of God where a huge proportion of the people turn to God?
Hearts,
Who departs?
children of the,
Their children.
Generation. Yeah, the next one.
but weren't you the one that mentioned this, that Abraham was strong?
Yeah.
Isaac, not so much, Jacob, strong.
Worse. And then Joseph, the fourth generation, goes back to pursuing God.
But would you say Jacob pursued, I mean, I mean,
He was a schemer
yeah.
and he tried to play God and of course play in the sense of
Yeah.
not pretend to be God, but play him as, a con man. He tried to run his cons on God.
So you're saying that it really skipped 2 generations, even though they were saved, but not like Joseph.
A group of missionaries gave up everything to go to Hawaii to reach the Hawaiian people with the gospel. Does anyone know the name of the family of missionaries that did that? You know their name.
They're English. I mean, they're not Hawaiians themselves, right?
Correct. You know their name. Dole.
Pineapple.
Dole?
Don't pineapple plant.
Because what happened when their children took over?
They became rich with the pineapple.
They said, we don't want to just give this gospel out. We want to,
Make some money.
and they bought up and conned up huge portions of Hawaii
Wow.
and started Dole pineapple. And that is the common thing. So if that were to happen in this generation, by the next generation, or at the absolute latest, the generation after that, it would be gone. And there's a reason for that. What is the reason for that? This is entirely human nature.
Doesn't the first generation, the one who goes, he makes the most radical change, right? Where the other ones, they kind of, the kids, they grow up in it. So it's not that they didn't have that radical change that the parent did. They practice like Christianese or whatever.
The parents paid.
Yeah.
It cost them something. They paid for that. Many of them lost friends, were ostracized. Am I telling the truth?
Yeah.
But the child who grows up in that Christian home, what price do they pay for their faith?
None, really.
They're celebrated.
Yeah.
When they get baptized, I had a fellow that I knew from Heart Cry, was preaching in Iraq, maybe it was Iraq. And this guy who was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in that community started hanging out at his house, and he thought he's going to kill us. And he ended up getting saved, and his wife got saved. And he showed up and said, I want to get baptized. And this missionary, you sure?
Because that's making the line in the sand.
So he goes, all right, well, we'll just do it at the house. And he shows up at the house, and there's 50 terrorists in the house to witness this, because the guy wanted it to be a testimony to his friends. And he baptized him. And then he ran for his life. And the only reason he was alive is he got out of the country before they murdered him. The guy that got baptized and his wife were tortured to death 3 or 4 days later. People that have that kind of conversion to Christ often pay a price. Most people not that dramatic, but there's a price to be paid. But when you grow up in the church, you get baptized, what happens?
So,
No, it's not just so. They throw a party. You get a cake. You get presents. The grandparents come. And what we don't pay for, we don't value.
It's the same premise as if you're a millionaire and you give your kid all the money, or if you have them work for it, even though you're rich, they'll just be spoiled.
Yeah. And the second thing is, what is the natural tendency of all human beings? What is our natural tendency in life?
Selfish.
And those are both true, but there's another one,
lazy.
That's what.
perhaps. But there's another one,
To be like their parents or those before them.
to rebel. Our natural tendency is always to rebel. And sometimes that God uses that for good. Because if you have a society that's going downhill and downhill and downhill, like right now in America, what's happening in some parts of America?
Brainwashing.
That's true. But if the polls are anywhere near accurate, Gen Z
Yeah.
is saying we don't want anything to do with that woke nonsense and that liberalism. It's a horror show. We want out. 4 years ago, 2020, Biden won the Gen Z vote by 2%, which is not very much because that's a pretty close thing. Before Biden dropped out, he was losing by 17%
The Gen Z,
of the Gen Z.
wow.
Kamala Harris is losing by 19%. So sometimes when evil grows, people rebel. And if you look through the Old Testament, you see that. Who's Hezekiah's father? Wicked king. He closed up the temple. What was the first thing Hezekiah did when he became king?
Cleaned out the
Killed it.
Before he could clean it up, what did he have to do?
Got
Take
rid
the
of all
bars out the
idols.
door.
He had to unseal it. His father had totally boarded up the temple so no one could go in. He drove the priests out of Jerusalem. closed the temple and said, nobody can go in there. And Hezekiah comes to the throne first month, first year, what's he do?
Opens everything.
He
up
opens the temple. So that rebellion can sometimes go both ways, but the problem is that when you have a great outpouring of God's Spirit, and it vastly changes the whole society, where is that rebellion going to go?
The wrong way.
Yeah, entirely
What did Paul say?
the wrong way.
The wrong way.
And so you never have, that's why no revival ever lasts. None. Because the next generation comes up. And that's true in secular things as well as among God's people. Let's go into the Old Testament again. What happens during Daniel's early life? He's taken into captivity.
Together with a whole bunch of people who are fed. Are you talking about what he's being fed and he goes, don't feed me that way?
Yep.
But he rebelled.
And what happens?
God blessed him.
God blesses him. He rises to prominence. And what happens?
It's thrown in a lion's den.
That's much later.
Much later, but still he came.
Nebuchadnezzar comes and says, I've had a dream.
Interprets it.
And the soothsayers say, tell us the dream and we'll interpret it. He goes,
Got you.
wait a sec.
Wait,
How do I know the interpretation's right? You tell me the dream and the interpretation.
we're done.
Nobody can do that.
And their answer was exactly that. Nobody can do that. So he says, I'll kill every one of you. Daniel goes, wait a minute. Give me a shot here.
We don't,
My God's able to do that.
we don't need bloodshed.
And Nebuchadnezzar has some level of turning to God. Was he saved? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But he has an encounter with God and he comes away with this man. Your God is the God of heaven. Your God is the only God. Your God is the true God. Now, his son goes off to the desert and becomes an archaeologist. Weird fact from history, but it's true. Gives up the throne. Goes off to excavate antiquity of the ancient Babylonian Empire. We're talking back toward the Tower of Babel
Talking
time.
about Belshazzar?
No,
No, who's that?
I can't pronounce the name.
Okay.
But Nebuchadnezzar's Nebuchadnezzar or something like that. Grandson is Belshazzar. He is the co-regent with his father, who's said, I don't want all that backstabbing stupidity. I'm going to go off in the desert and dig around for fossils. What happens with Belshazzar? Does he follow through on Nebuchadnezzar's God as the great God of heaven?
No,
Writing is on the wall.
he becomes.
What brought about the writing on the wall?
Took all the stuff out of the temple.
The gold cups.
Yeah, the cups, and drank out, had a big,
And had a big
Party.
orgy,
Yeah.
pagan revelry, using God, the articles from God's temple.
Holy articles, yeah.
And that's when the handwriting on the wall and yada yada. So again, what do we see happening? There's this great encounter where they rise to a spiritual level that probably the people of Babylon had never achieved before. Within 2 generations, where are they?
yeah. How about the Pharaoh who didn't remember
Yeah.
the other Pharaoh?
So it's just
Yeah.
a scale that keeps, a seesaw that keeps going back and forth.
Yep. The problem is once it goes down, which is easier, going up or down?
Easy to go down.
Down. Once it goes down, it's very hard to come back up. That takes a very special act from God. But once it's up, how easy is it to go down? Very easy. Because that's the natural inclination. So that's why that would never last.
Question for you.
Sure.
Millennial Kingdom, when we will be there with our new bodies that won't sin, but the people that are coming in from the tribulation who made it through there, they will have children.
Correct.
And what the people.
Isaiah 65.
Yeah, and the people coming in, now all of a sudden, the inclination that you were talking about, that it's sin is downhill because it's easier to sin, doing the right thing is uphill. You said that will reverse in the millennial kingdom. The people.
We're gonna go back to Eden,
So
the ultimate Eden,
how
the
about
way
the
it should have been.
people coming into there, the live people? Will they all be saved? And if so,
They-
and if not, will they have, I guess they would be all coming in saved, but their children won't be. But will they have this sinful nature in them?
Apparently not.
So God's gonna change both the people coming in and. the
And their
people
children.
born.
Yeah, they're gonna go in saved because naturally they.
Well, who gets to go in having not died and been resurrected? Who goes into the kingdom? We started this in Sunday school and then people have asked other questions and we never finished it.
The people that made it through the tribulation, that there will be people that'll make.
Who
it
didn't
through.
take the
No.
mark.
But won't 1/3 of Israel be, the remnant will be saved, like 2/3 will die, but it
Well, there's no place that says what that remnant is.
said
But-
1/3. It said 2/3 will die, right?
I'd have to,
I believe so.
you'd have to show me the verse.
I'll check it.
But it's not just everyone who made it through the tribulation period. Who goes into the kingdom age?
We're talking about the living people
Living
made it
people,
through, that made it, that were.
but not everybody that makes it through, because what stands between the tribulation period and the millennial kingdom?
Judgment.
What judgment? Oh, there is a judgment, absolutely.
Is it the sheep and goats?
It is not the white throne judgment. That's why we were talking in Sunday school. There are 3 judgments, end time judgments. And we started with this and then got distracted and never got back to it. But there are 3 end times judgment. There is the great white throne, which is the judgment of unbelievers. There is the Bema seat or judgment seat, which is the judgment of believers. And there is a third one. What is the third one?
Sheep and goats.
The sheep's and
Said it 3 judgments ago.
yeah,
He wasn't
Well,
ready for her to say it yet.
right.
3 judgments ago.
I
I've
wanted
been
people
there.
to think before you gave them the easy answer.
You got.
Because what they get cheaply, they don't value. The sheep and the goats, where is that from? Where's that found? No,
No,
oh, Matthew. I'm looking for something a little more specific than that.
Matthew 5,
No.
6.
Keep going. Whip it out.
You'll eventually.
What do you think?
Matthew 59. Just make up a. Oh,
18,
Nope.
20.
Keep going.
Come on, Joy.
I'm looking.
It's not the Olivet discourse.
Who said it's,
Huh?
who said it's not the owl?
Matthew
This
25.
25.
That was gonna be my next one.
That's not the upper room.
Olivet discourse is not the upper room.
No, they're out on the Mount of Olives. They're
I'm
outside.
sorry,
They were out. Hey, look at this mountain over here. They were not in the upper room, or they
Okay.
would not have seen them.
so I had the right answer, I
Yeah.
had the wrong place.
Why-
Yeah.
because why-
Matthew 59.
Yeah. Matthew 25. What is the judgment of the sheep and goats? And it says specifically, he will judge the nations. But what is the judgment?
Whether they did things in his name, what they did.
Whether they visited the prisoners and fed people and all of these things. And I have had all kinds of liberals tell me, oh, that means that Jesus commands that we let prisoners out of prison. Those rapists and murderers, we should have compassion on them. We shouldn't have long prison sentences. Jesus wants them released from prison.
That's where we're getting that from.
Who are the prisoners and the hungry and the,
That were locked away for their beliefs.
they visited the people Antichrist was persecuting. They weren't visiting murderers and rapists and arsonists and on and on and on. They were visiting those who had been rounded up by Antichrist and were awaiting
Persecuted
Execution.
for their belief.
for their faith. And they visited them. That's why, what does Jesus call the people that they visited?
When you visited me and
When you visited the least of these, my
Witnessing?
brothers, you did this unto me. Why does Jesus call them his brothers?
Okay.
Because they were believers who were being illegitimately persecuted. And these people, although perhaps not believers themselves, chose to minister to those people.
That got them into heaven. That got them into the millennial
That
kingdom.
not that got them into the millennial kingdom. So what are we talking? What would be? What would? No, it is faith lived out. It is making decisions based on faith.
Well, then they had to have chosen Christ.
I'll give you an example of that.
Otherwise they didn't know
What
it was
would-
faith.
What would be the analogous of that from history?
And Frank,
Yeah. The many Christians or Jews who hid the Jews from the Nazis.
As well as the Corrie ten Boons.
As the Corrie ten Boons and the
Anne Frank wasn't a Christian. Pretend Boone was the one.
was Christian. But there were German
see someone.
people,
Hit Anne Frank into heaven.
not heaven. This is not
Millennial
heaven.
kingdom.
Millennium.
The millennial kingdom.
A different way into the millennial kingdom besides faith in Christ and Christ alone. Is what.
It
you're
is,
saying.
no, I am not saying that. I am saying, as James says, that faith without works is dead. That they have enough faith to choose to do what is right. It doesn't say there that they,
Lynn has enough faith to do what is right, and she is so far
There's-
from being a Christian, since she doesn't believe most of the Bible.
but
David
this is not during the time of Antichrist, when they have this stark choice between giving in to Antichrist and when Satan is so. The only thing, because it doesn't say they believed, it says that they helped.
Another question then, if these people are going into the prisons and helping and feeding and giving water and this and that, Don't you think they have the mark?
That is a great question that I can't answer.
And you're
I
not
don't,
getting into the millennial kingdom.
yeah. So I don't know. My guess is, and this is the only way I've been able to put it together in my head. Where is the mark going to be? The tribulation takes place for 7 years, correct? Does it immediately start with the mark day one?
3.5 years in.
It certainly builds up. So we're talking less than 7 years. How is this mark applied? By supernatural demons rushing over the world and doing?
No, you have to accept it.
It's by human effort.
Right, because you have to have the choice.
People are going out and forcing people to receive this mark. Where is that going to happen the quickest and the most widely?
Cities, heavily populated places.
Right, where people are not.
What we would call today,
Metropolitan cities.
but the first world. Europe, America, Japan, maybe China is emerging first world. Where is it going to be a lot harder to do that?
Africa.
Parts of Africa,
Hmm.
Mongolia,
Random islands.
Siberia.
Siberia, the northern expanses of Canada and Alaska.
Mars.
Yeah. But there's gonna be a lot of, and that's why Jesus says, when you see,
You've got Elon Musk on there.
and that's why Jesus says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place, what?
Right.
Run.
Flee. Because it's going to be hard for them to track down everyone to get the mark. So you're going to have people that embrace the mark. You're going to have people that accepted the mark, whether they were forced to or not, they made the choice not to die. You're going to have people who are martyred for not receiving the mark, right?
So if
Right.
they accept the mark so that because they refuse to die. is that
They
what
still
you're-
have the mark.
But so they're under Satan's influence then.
Yeah.
So why would they be going in?
But I'm saying there's a fourth group of people. You've got the embracers, you've got the acceptors, you've got the dead, martyred rejectors, and you've got a fourth group, the hiders. The people that hid out, that were out in the middle of nowheres, the people in the Brazilian rainforest, the people in Papua New Guinea, the people in Indonesia that, because there's entire tribes that with all of our technology, we haven't even made contact with them yet. And so my guess is that these people are this group. They haven't embraced Christ to the point where they die for their faith, rejecting the mark. They've simply hid out. That is not going to heaven. Because every person in the millennial kingdom is going to have to do what?
Make a decision.
Make a decision.
They are going to have to die and face judgment between heaven and hell. They will have their own time at either the great white throne or the bema. So those who survived that are given the chance to come into the kingdom. And now you've got the question of, will they embrace Jesus as Lord? Does everybody in the millennial kingdom do that?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
Wait, what? Why would you say?
Because Satan gets released again to tempt.
Because at the end,
Yeah.
a whole huge, massive
Yes,
percentage of the world follows Satan when he's released.
That means old light, no.
So what does that tell us about their faith? Have they been worshiping Jesus all throughout the thing?
No.
No.
Probably. But that worship was never really tested. And when they were given the choice, they just served because, boy, that's what everybody's doing. A lot like the American church today, right?
Jump on the bandwagon.
But when they were tested, when Satan's released, and now you can either stay faithful to Christ or you can turn and follow this other way, what happens to many of them?
They turn and follow.
So was their faith genuine?
No.
That's why I'm saying it's not heaven. They are not going to heaven. There's a big difference in going into the millennial kingdom.
They're
Because
allowed to stay in the millennial, you're suggesting that they're allowed to stay in the millennial kingdom because of their good works on earth to God's people.
because of their willingness to sacrifice for Christ's people. I'm not saying that. That's what Matthew 25 says. I'm just reading Matthew 25.
To help you.
Because it's not like they're actually going to heaven. They're just going to another earth, and then they have to make the decision there whether then they would go to heaven or they go to the lake of fire.
And again, can we draw this? What is the works that has nothing to do with salvation? This is an important thing. What are the works that have nothing to do with salvation?
Things we do for our own personal glory. The
Let's
self-boast.
change the last part of that. It's things we do for what?
Us?
No,
Others.
it is things we do to earn God's
Favor.
favor. Those are the works that Paul is against, right? When Paul talks about faith, that works do not save, for we are saved by faith, not by works. That's what he means by works. But there's an entirely different definition of works. And what are those? And those are the ones James uses. Because what does James say about? Yeah. They are evidence of our compliance with God, our obedience to God. And what does it say about these people? Were they doing that to earn God's favor? Do these people go, oh, Jesus, we did that to earn your favor? When
They're
Jesus
trying to
says,
work their way to heaven.
Because you did this to the least of these, what do the people say? What do the people say?
Weren't there or something?
Lord,
What?
when did we see you? Were they doing this to earn God's favor? No, they were doing it just because it was right. They didn't even understand what they were doing it. Lord, when did we do this for you? We just did this for them because it was the right thing to do. Okay. This is where.
So that makes you a sheep? You did the right thing? No.
Don't.
So.
Only, again, that's why this judgment is entirely different. This is not an eternal judgment. This is not a heaven and hell judgment. This is something different than that.
You're talking that the sheep and goat judgment is to get you only into the millennial kingdom.
Only into the millennial
Yeah, I can
kingdom.
see that then.
It's not about whether you are eternally saved or not, because are people in the millennial kingdom not eternally saved?
Some of the ones that are born there certainly aren't
Well,
gonna be.
It doesn't specify that they weren't born there. It just says there's that they were born there. Just says a mass of people did it. Maybe some of those people were people who went through the tribulation, but hey, having been through the kingdom, they go,
Well, the fact that they turned doesn't mean they weren't genuinely saved, because in heaven, we had the perfect angels and Satan, and they turned.
But-
You don't have to be there to not be saved and not be saved to turn. If that's the case, it was like that in heaven.
It seems though that in heaven going forward, and I would argue that's why God makes it so hard to believe. The people that there is no one going forward in heaven who ever turns back from that. That there will never be another rebellion like Satan in heaven. That was settled. The angels all chose, and that choice is irrevocable, it seems. Not just for the demons, but it seems also for the angels that didn't fall. They're settled. They're not going back on that. There's not going to be another Satan rising up and starting another rebellion. And
Well, I think they all kind of saw, yeah, I don't think that's wise. That's not.
maybe, but I think that it goes deeper than that.
Yeah, right.
Because threat doesn't always produce the right response. But I think that it goes beyond that every believer who is in heaven has been eternal. That choice was eternally made for them. And that's why it's things like
For them or by them?
by them. Yes. By them. And that's why this whole thing of endurance is so important. He who endures to the end will be saved, because what kind of faith is it that saves?
An enduring
Faith
faith.
that lasts.
Yeah.
A faith that perseveres. And because it persevered in this life, demonstrates that the choice was a solid one, not a frivolous one.
Right, plus once you're over there, you won't have the temptations that you are stuck with down here, so that makes it easier, because it'll
Yeah.
get easier.
But it seems like there is that decision, and that's why it's so much that, this has to be a consequential decision, not just a frivolous one. And that's why this whole idea of you prayed one time, one place for 1 second, and that means you're eternally saved. No, it's a faith that proves itself throughout the life. Because once heaven is sealed, it's sealed for everyone that's there. And one last thing with that, the millennial kingdom is not the new earth either. Because remember, the millennial kingdom is on this earth, and how does Revelation 21 begin? The kingdom, because why?
Former one for this.
The old heaven and earth have been destroyed. There's now a new heaven and a new earth. So will every one of God's people be in heaven?
Well, if they were, then what's the point of having the earth?
Correct.
Be able to come and go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's answered. Because what is the nexus? What is the nexus between the new heaven and the new earth? There is a nexus that allows transport between the new heaven and the new earth. And what is it? The New Jerusalem.
Well, then you won't be able to see the Grand Canyon because it'll be gone.
He won't fly.
Better go behind.
But I want to do it during the kingdom, when there's people still with bodies.
He's gonna do it to the kingdom.
But the New Jerusalem is the nexus between that. Why is there a heaven, a new heaven and a new earth?
At the population something.
Is it for those Old
So-
Testament prophets and all?
Ah,
Having,
what was the promise to Israel?
Your
right.
That they would have a earthly home, an eternal earthly home. What is the promise to the Christians, to the church?
Eternal heavenly home.
A eternal heavenly home. So when you come to Revelation 21, you have a new heaven and a new earth because you have two peoples. You have Israel and you have the church.
We be separated.
But you
Uh,
can visit.
Hope not, I'd sure like to meet some of.
Well, separated in that, yes, we are separated from the standpoint that we have different houses. We
Like a
have a
different country.
different, a different existence, whatever that is. But not separated in that we are kept apart by any means. Any more than you are kept apart from your neighbors just because you don't live at the same address.
Sounds like the Jehovah Witnesses, you know, how they figured that the 144 will be in, 1,000 will be in heaven and the others will be on earth.
Until they overcame that number and then they had to see.
Well, that's when they came up with the new earth. And again, yes, it is like those. Why? Because they're taking scripture and twisting it.
Yeah.
So they're misinterpreting what is a truth and bending it to their own destruction. But that's so the much different thing with the millennial kingdom. And remember, what is one of the things that is going to be happening during the kingdom?
We're gonna be judging angels and.
We will be judging people during the kingdom. We will reign with him. Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? I don't think that's the great white throne, because at the great white throne, it says he who sat upon it. It's not all the saints who were gathered around it.
It's God.
Where is it that judgment will be happening? During the millennial kingdom. And the fact that there will be judgment implies what?
Punishment.
Sin.
That there will be people who will sin during the millennial kingdom. And
I thought
that
they were supposed to be done away with right away or killed right away.
People coming into it.
but
and the-
that's
Except for
my
those who die, who sin, they die.
correct.
They don't-
Because it says he who dies in 100 years will be considered a mere child.
Right.
What will be the penalty at that point for sin?
Death.
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 Right.
Why? That goes back to where we started tonight. What do we have in the millennial kingdom?
God will be right there.
The greatest revelation of God's glory that could be had in the physical realm.
Right.
So any affront to that, what's it going to bring?
Instant death.
Instant terrifying judgment.
But will children be born with sinful nature?
Apparently not. That is what I believe when it says that it says the children will no longer be born to sorrows.
Yeah, but wouldn't anybody that comes in to the millennial kingdom, if you didn't die, if just they would come in like we are, right?
They-
now?
They apparently there will be a transformation of their natures, because let's be absolutely honest. If we're being judged for any sin,
You'd be dead in 2 minutes.
yeah, how long would the best human being with our nature last?
Long.
Yeah, not 1,000 years.
As soon as we had that prideful thought of, look at me.
Yeah. So that's where
Man,
there will be that change of nature,
What happened?
and it goes back
before,
to Eden.
when we ate the apple, there was the transformation
Yeah.
there.
Was Eden because of the surroundings?
Was eaten what?
no.
Was Eden because of the surroundings?
No.
No.
What made Eden?
God was
God's
present.
And I would say something else. Yeah, our nature. It wasn't Eden because of the plants. It was our nature because of, it was Eden because of the human nature of innocence and lack of sin. That's what made it Eden. And as soon as sin entered,
Definitely.
you're you're out of here.
Kicked out.
And remember, what did God say about their death?
The earth you
The
shall be-
day you eat of it, you shall die. What's the death?
Spiritual.
Yeah.
Right, because physically they're still alive.
They lived for what, 900
Yeah,
years? So
They were both unsaved for a period of time, right?
yeah.
you're asking questions God didn't give us. What is Deuteronomy 34, 32 or something like
I mean,
that?
if death came into them, spiritual death came in until they did.
They
the
were
sacrifice.
spiritually dead, yeah.
So,
But so were we.
Jackie.
The fellow that led me to Christ, when people would ask questions, he'd just shake his head. He goes, fools can ask questions that wise men can't answer.
See y'all.
Good night.
Bye.
And it took people a few
Thanks,